All right, you told me one of the craziest stories when I met you in Mexico, and I want you to tell it on the podcast about what happened in Iraq when you were filming there. You want to tell that story to our listeners?
Yeah, yeah, sure, absolutely. So this is the suicide bomber story?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Why were you in Iraq, and tell us what happened?
Right. So 2017, when the war against terror was raging on in Iraq, I kept asking myself, is the news an accurate representation of what's going on? Are these ISIS guys really evil? Does evil exist? Or is this a manufactured war? So I decided to go to Iraq and make a film about it. So I found some funding. I teamed up with Riot, it's a big production company out of LA that focuses on virtual reality, and I got sent to Iraq with an assistant and a fixer. And to make a long story short, we ended up sneaking in essentially, uh, though somewhat legitimately, to the war zone, to the front lines.
Oh wow.
So as Mosul city was, the heart of darkness. It was where the Iraqi army was fighting,
And ISIS had
and
control
ISIS.
over that for a while, right?
Exactly, man. It was hell on earth. So it was like as soon as you got in past the checkpoints, you could hear the rumble of mortars in the distance, the explosives. I mean, it was kind of like a war film, but in reality, and nobody was to be trusted because you were warned that, even the shepherds sometimes laced their sheep with bombs. So if like,
Jeez.
yeah, so like when the car stopped to let sheep cross the road, you were scared shitless because you knew that there was a possibility that somebody in the distance could blow up one of those sheep.
Damn.
So it was dark times, and as soon as we kind of got in to the front lines, a helicopter flew over us, and suddenly there was chaos, and all the soldiers that had been pretty well organized, taking care of checkpoints, started rushing towards this field, and so as a journalist, my first instinct was let's go follow them, which was probably not the brightest idea thinking back on it, but we did. And so myself and Alex Laurie, who was helping film, and the fixer Garib, who was a local from Kurdistan, rushed into the field, and we put a camera on one of the soldiers' helmets. And as we're rushing into this field, it's chaos. There are people shooting everywhere. And we don't even know what they're aiming at. There's helicopters flying by, shooting down into this field. It
Wow.
just looked like a video game, man. And so basically, as we're rushing in, we went past this hill, and we noticed that there's this guy on the floor. And so at the front, about 20 feet from this guy, there's me, there's the assistant producer, there's the fixer, and there's a bunch of soldiers, and a couple other journalists, some locals. And so the captain, who's actually wearing our camera, tells one of his soldiers to go grab the guy. And so this soldier runs up to this wounded ISIS member who's on the floor, and as soon as he gets up right next to him, the guy turns around, and you see that he's covered in explosives, and he just presses a button and blows up. In that 30 seconds of chaos, all you see is an explosion. I saw a leg literally fly by my head. My ears went numb, and I hit the ground. And when we woke up from that, I turned to my left, and there was this French journalist from the French Associated Press trying to light a cigarette, and he kept saying "merde, merde, merde" because he couldn't light his fucking cigarette because his matches were covered in shit because he got hit with the intestines from this suicide bomber who blew himself up. And then
Jesus.
I look to my right, and there's my friend and a bunch of other journalists and soldiers, and they're all covered in blood, and I'm covered in blood. And then I look at the place where the guy blew himself up, and there's just a giant hole. And somehow the soldier who went to grab him was okay. He was just shook up, but nothing happened to him. So nobody died other than the suicide bomber. And that was a traumatic introduction to the war in Iraq. It was my first day in the combat zone in the front lines. Um, so
And you that was your first day.
first day, man.
And how long did you have to stay after that?
A week. A week. It was so crazy, man. And you know, throughout that week, we basically your choices are either stay bunkered down or go explore. So we went and explored and got to see all these other aspects of the war and had a lot of close shots. We were sniped at. We had suicide cars try to get us. I mean, the fact is that war zones are hell. They're chaotic. I can understand why a lot of people are traumatized and get PSD from them, especially staying there for long periods of time. Luckily, I don't think I got PTSD. I mean, it's been several years and I've been fine. But I don't know that I got an answer to my question about good and evil. What I did see was that war should be avoided at all costs. It is an absolute horror.